Why is it that no one in a family of five is close to anyone else, including parents and children? Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we're unraveling something that might hit a little too close to home. Imagine waking up in a house filled with five people, two parents, three kids, and yet it feels like a ghost town. There's the smell of toast you didn't make, a TV humming in the living room you didn't turn on, and the faint creak of footsteps upstairs that you instinctively ignore. Everyone's alive, everyone's awake, but no one says good morning. That's where you live, right in the middle of it. And tonight, we're going to explore what that actually does to a person. Spoiler, it's not great, and you probably won't survive this reality check without a few internal winces. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment your city and local time. I'm always curious where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge downstairs in socked feet, passing by your dad who's already sipping coffee, eyes locked on the morning news. He doesn't look up, doesn't even nod. There's a moment where you think about saying morning, but the hesitation wins. You open the fridge instead. Your sister's already left? Or maybe she's still asleep? You don't ask. Your mom's sitting on the patio, scrolling on her phone, her face blank and blue lit. You hear a bird chirp somewhere outside, and for one absurd moment, the chirp feels more human than anyone in this house. It's not like anyone hates each other. There's no yelling, no slammed doors. Just this never-ending emotional quiet, a kind of anti-intimacy that hums through the walls. You eat in silence. Even the chewing feels like a personal offense in this house. It's not dramatic like the fall of Rome, which, by the way, crumbled partly due to internal fragmentation and an over-reliance on routine sound familiar. No, this is more like a steady leak in a boat that no one notices until the floor's wet. The truth is, families don't always break from trauma. Sometimes they just never form in the first place. Historians still argue whether families in medieval times were tighter knit than now, especially because households were smaller and work was shared. But if you compare your house to a Viking longhouse, where everyone literally slept next to each other for survival, well, your five-bedroom Wi-Fi-enabled emotional wasteland doesn't exactly breed closeness. Maybe it started when you were little. No one taught you how to say what you feel. You learned instead to listen for tone shifts and footstep patterns. Crying got you a closed door or maybe a tissue and a quick, "You're okay." Celebrating a win felt like bragging, so you stopped bringing up your report cards. Over time, you became a master of emotional weather forecasting. Is dad in a mood? Will mom ask about school? Or can I just ghost walk past her? Some people grow up learning love through forehead kisses, awkward back pats, or goofy nicknames. You, you got love through logistics, rides to practice food on the table or roof. Functional love, not felt love. Quirky fact. In ancient Egypt, kids weren't even named until age 3 sometimes because infant mortality was so high. You didn't count until you could survive. Sometimes you wonder if your emotional self missed that milestone, like you were physically raised sure, but emotionally left behind. The hard part is you want to be close. You crave it. Every now and then, someone in your family laughs. A real spontaneous burst of joy. And you freeze. You drink it in. But it never lasts more than 10 seconds. Then everyone drifts again, like satellites perfectly orbiting, but never connecting. The weirdest part no one else seems to notice. They go on. They do laundry. They scroll. They work. They eat. They sleep. Repeat. It's like you all live in parallel timelines that rarely intersect unless it's to pass the salt. And here's a tiny joke to ease that existential tension. If this house were a sitcom, it'd be called Keeping Up with the Emotionally Constipated, and every episode would end with someone not hugging. Sometimes late at night you wonder what would happen if you left. Would anyone knock on your door? Would anyone even notice before dinner? And still, you stay. You fold into the rhythm. It's not terrible. You've got your own room, decent Wi-Fi. Your Spotify algorithm knows you better than your parents do. But you feel the void. And it's not some melodramatic hole, it's quieter. Like that feeling you get when you reach for your phone and realize it's not in your pocket. Something should be there. It isn't. And it nags at you quietly. Tomorrow you'll wake up. Your dad will be sipping coffee. The fridge will hum. Someone will walk past you in the hallway without a word. And you'll think again about saying good morning. But probably you won't. Section 2. Dinner time rolls around like it always does, on time, orderly and entirely devoid of soul. You hear the oven beat plates being shuffled, footsteps moving in familiar patterns. No one announces dinner's ready. They just know, like migrating birds that sense when it's time to move. You shuffle into the dining room. The table's already set, but not by anyone in particular. It just happens. Kind of like everything else in this house. Food is placed with robotic grace. Chicken, some vegetables, rice. It's all seasoned, cooked well enough hot. Functionally perfect, emotionally empty. You sit across from your brother who's looking down at his phone, earbuds dangling like the roots of a half-dead plant. He scrolls. You scoop. The only sounds are forks clicking against ceramic, the occasional sip, and someone, probably mom, chewing just a little too loudly. No one asks about your day. You don't ask about theirs. Conversation has become a rare and awkward currency in this house, like using a gold coin to buy gas. It feels excessive, unnecessary, even embarrassing. And yet there's this performance, a weird shared pantomime of togetherness. Like ancient Roman banquets that looked social on the outside, but were often pure politics underneath. Everyone sat close, dined long, but rarely let their guard down. And yes, historians still argue whether those elite feasts built real bonds or just kept people in check with wine and decorum. Sound familiar? You wonder if it would be weird to say something, anything, like, "This rice is good," or "Did you see that weird cloud outside?" But then you picture the responses: head tilts, shrugs, maybe a confused blink. The idea dies before it's born. Here's your fun fringe tidbit for the evening. In 18th century France, families didn't always dine together. Children often ate separately or even alone. The modern family dinner is more of a mid-20th century invention, sold as a wholesome all-American ideal on TV. So technically what your family's doing isn't wrong, it's just regressive. At this table, it feels like everyone's wearing invisible headphones. You might as well be humming your own internal soundtracks. Yours just happens to be the quiet static of suppressed connection. It's not that your parents are bad people, they're just exhausted. Your dad chews with the eyes of a man halfway between emails and a mental spreadsheet. Your mom glances at the clock twice, never once at your face. You used to wonder what they talk about when you're not around, but now you're not even sure they do. You glance at your younger sibling who eats in small bites, careful not to make noise. They've learned the choreography too. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't break the rhythm. And yet the silence feels louder than any argument. It buzzes. It vibrates in your molars. You begin to imagine what an actual fight might feel like. At least it would be passionate. At least it would matter. But instead, it's all just tension with no spark, like a storm that never comes. Occasionally, your mom will say something mid-bite, usually logistical. Your dentist appointment is Tuesday, or trash goes out tonight. No eye contact, no follow-up. If you're lucky, someone chuckles. Like that one time your dad tried to microwave foil, but even that was met with a kind of muted, choreographed amusement. 3 seconds of laughter, then silence folds over everything like a blanket. You realize how weird it is that you're hungry for their attention even now. Like one kind word would open the floodgates, like one question. How are you really could change everything. But no one asks. No one has ever asked. You once tried to bring a friend home for dinner. Just once. You remember the way their eyes darted around the table, the awkward smile they gave when no one responded to their "hi, nice to meet you." Afterward, they said, "Your family's really quiet." You never invited anyone back again. You sometimes wish you could record these meals and play them back in court as evidence, exhibit of my childhood. But no jury would convict anyone. That's the curse of quiet dysfunction, it leaves no bruises. Just a vague ache that makes you question yourself. Wouldn't it be easier if there were shouting matches? At least those are recognizable. Instead, you have this calm, polite, sterile dinner ritual that leaves you hungrier than before. You poke at your food and glance at the clock. You count the minutes until the first person finishes eating. That's the real cue to leave. Once one goes, the others follow. No lingering, no dessert, no conversation. Just a swift retreat to individual screens, headphones, and digital worlds. And here's your required joke. Your family eats like ninjas, silent, coordinated, and emotionally elusive. As you get up and rinse your plate, you feel it again, that strange, weightless grief. Not the kind that knocks you over, the kind that makes you drift. You dry your hands and head back to your room knowing that tomorrow's dinner will be exactly the same, and the day after that, and probably for the rest of your life. You wonder if you filmed this house for a month and fast-forwarded the footage, would it even look like people lived here? Or just ghosts following routines, never touching, never speaking, never seeing? Yeah, probably ghosts. Section 3. You're 10 again, small, hopeful, and watching cartoons a little too loud on a Saturday morning. Then the TV clicks off. Your mom stands there, arms crossed. Your dad's still asleep, she says flatly. No smile, no warmth. Just a reminder like a posted sign that reads, "Keep noise to a minimum." Emotions too. It's not that they were bad parents. It's that they were separate. Always. Some kids grow up with a team, mom and dad, a united front. Yours felt more like two solo acts accidentally scheduled in the same time slot. They didn't fight, but they didn't join forces either. Each had their lane, their tone, their areas of control. Your dad, quiet, methodical, always halfway into a project, building a shed, fixing a server, managing spreadsheets for a job you still don't understand. He handled big things, bills, cars, oil changes. He didn't do hugs. He barely did eye contact. Your mom task-driven with a love for lists and alarms. She meal planned like a drill sergeant. She did school drop-offs, field trip forms, and the art of "how was your day" without waiting for an answer. Sometimes she asked twice just out of habit. Together they never seemed mad, but they never seemed there either. Emotionally, MIA. Like Victorian parents who often handed their kids to nannies and viewed affection as a weakness. Yes, really? Historians still argue whether that emotional distance was cultural or just class-based. Either way, the damage kind of timeless. They didn't sit together on the couch, didn't hold hands in public. They coordinated life like two efficient roommates, not partners in raising a family. And you live between them like a neutral zone. You never ran to them with problems. What would they do? They'd listen maybe, but fix it, comfort you. You never learned to expect that. Once when you cried after a nightmare, your mom just rubbed your back and said, "Try to be brave." It wasn't cruel. It just didn't reach you. You lay awake afterward, wondering if she'd come back to check on you. She didn't. And your dad, forget it. The man would rather face a rabid raccoon than talk about dreams or fears. You knew better than to knock on his office door unless the house was on fire. And even then you'd pause and think, is this really a fire? You started to notice the divide when you saw other families. The way some dads hugged their kids without a reason. The way moms leaned in to listen. You weren't jealous, not really, more confused. Wait, people do that. Your parents did show up. They attended recitals sometimes with flowers. They drove you to soccer. They paid for orthodontics, but connection. It was always an accidental byproduct, never the point. Here's your quirky fact of the night Emperor Marcus Aurelius. The Stoic philosopher was famously emotionally reserved even with his own children. Letters from his son suggest their relationship was more like a mentorship than anything familial. You could kind of relate. You got good at independence early. You learned how to make lunch, fold laundry, fix your computer, all before you were legally allowed to microwave popcorn. It was survival, sure, but it also gave your parents a reason to stay uninvolved. You've always been so mature, they said. You heard thanks for not needing us. Over time, you noticed they didn't really ask each other questions either. Conversations were mostly updates. Did you call the plumber? What time is the dentist? Can you pick up milk? Once you tried an experiment. You sat next to them during a rare movie night and leaned your head gently on your mom's shoulder, just to see. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away, but she didn't move closer either. It was like resting against a decorative pillow, harmless but empty. They weren't abusive, they were distant. And that's harder to explain to people. You don't have a tragic story, no courtroom drama, no headline-worthy trauma, just a quiet ache, like a sore muscle you didn't know you had until someone finally touched it. That's what this family is, a collection of people raised by emotional minimalists who quietly became minimalists themselves. You try not to blame them. They came from the same blueprint. Your grandfather silent, your grandmother a woman of few words and fewer hugs. No one told your parents how to connect. They just did what they knew. And now, so do you. Still, there's a hollow feeling when you hear a friend say, "I tell my mom everything." Or when someone says their dad cried at graduation, you nod, you smile. But it feels like they're speaking a language you've only heard in subtitles. And here's your quiet little joke for the section. If love languages were fonts, your parents speak in Arial size 8, functional plain and barely legible if you squint. Now you're older and they still live in the same house, still together, still parallel. And you wonder, are they happy or just used to each other like an old pair of shoes, worn comfortable, not worth replacing? Sometimes you sit in the back seat as they drive. No music, no talking, just road noise and shared silence. You watch them, their faces, their eyes, their hands, and you can't help but wonder if they ever really saw each other at all. And if they didn't, how were they ever going to see you? Section 4. You pass your brother in the hallway. He's got earbuds and hoodie up, eyes glazed over from some late-night YouTube dive or a 3-hour gaming sprint. You nod. He doesn't see it. Or maybe he does and pretends he doesn't. Either way, no one speaks. It's strange, isn't it? You live with him. You share genetics, bathrooms, and Wi-Fi bandwidth. You know he likes strawberry Pop-Tarts and hates group projects. You know he talks more online than he does in real life. But beyond that, he might as well be an NPC in your personal storyline. Same goes for your sister. She's older, cooler, drifts through the house like a celebrity in hiding. She's got her headphones, her part-time job, her perfectly curated Instagram full of fake smiles and filtered brunches. You sometimes see her in the kitchen at 2 a.m., making ramen and barely acknowledging your presence like you're a hotel guest, not a sibling. You weren't always like this. Once you all played together, you built blanket forts, fought over whose turn it was on the Nintendo, had inside jokes about cartoons and whose burp was loudest. But that faded, slowly, subtly, like water evaporating from a cup no one was watching. By the time you hit your teens, things shifted. The house felt more like a boarding school, each kid living their own story arc. There were no shared playlists, no whispered secrets under the covers, just locked doors, muffled music, and long stretches where you realized you hadn't spoken to each other in days. Here's the kicker no one fought. There were no big betrayals, no fights over borrowed clothes or stolen crushes, just detachment. And that's the worst part. You didn't grow apart from conflict. You just forgot how to care. Here's a weird historical fact. In the Qing dynasty, Chinese families often lived under one roof for generations, siblings, cousins, uncles, all managing one massive household. Yet even there, letters reveal deep rivalries, jealousy, and emotional icebergs. Turns out, even proximity doesn't guarantee intimacy. Sometimes you fantasize about starting over, like if you and your siblings had been born to different parents in a smaller house with less tech and more backyard. Maybe then you would have grown close. Maybe then you wouldn't feel so unbonded. You tried once a few years ago. You made a joke during dinner, some silly TikTok reference. Your brother smirked. Your sister didn't look up. You thought, this is it. This is the spark. But it fizzled out. No reply. No momentum. Just silence and more mashed potatoes. And, hey, here's your fringe tidbit for the night. There's a psychology term called emotional cutoff. It's when people distance themselves from family not out of hatred, but to manage unresolved tensions. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes emotional, sometimes both. It can happen between adults, or between kids growing up side by side. You wonder what memories they'll hold on to. Will your brother remember how you used to play Mario Kart until midnight, laughing so hard your stomach hurt? Or will he just recall the last few years walking past each other like ghosts with Netflix subscriptions? Your sister used to braid your hair. You remember that. You remember her giggle, her hand slapping your shoulder when she messed up. But now it's like someone changed the channel and never gave you the remote. You keep hoping for a reset. Maybe a power outage that forces everyone into one room. Maybe a snowstorm that traps you together and cracks the ice. But then again, even when the power did go out last year, everyone just went to bed early. Here's your quiet joke for the section. If emotional connection were a group project, your siblings would be the ones who just put their names on it and dip. It's hard to explain this kind of distance to other people. They assume sibling rivalry. They ask about pranks, drama, wild fights. You've got none. Just indifference wrapped in shared DNA. You tried texting your brother once, just, hey. It took him 2 days to reply with, what's up? You never responded. The conversation died there buried in the soft soil of mutual neglect. And yet, sometimes you miss them. You see an old photo, all of you covered in spaghetti sauce or jumping into a pool, and you ache, not for what you had, but for what you almost had. What you could have had. You wonder if they ever feel the same. If your sister ever scrolls past those old photos and pauses. If your brother ever looks at you and thinks, I wish I knew you better. But if they do, no one's saying anything. You dream sometimes about growing up and reconnecting. Maybe after college. Maybe when one of you has a kid. Maybe then you'll sit around a table again and laugh. Maybe someone will say, remember when we were kids, and for a moment it won't feel so far away. But right now, you're not siblings. You're cohabitants, background characters in each other's lives. And the worst part, you're starting to get used to it. Section 5. You find an old photo album in a drawer one day. You weren't even looking for it, just digging for batteries or maybe some tape. But there it is, cracked spine dust on the cover corners curling like tired leaves. You open it and instantly you're staring into a version of your family that doesn't match the one in the mirror. Everyone's smiling. Sunlight glows on skin. Your mom is holding your hand. Your dad is tossing your brother in the air. Your sister is laughing in mid-sprint. And there you are, small, gap-toothed, joyful. Together. You blink, you flip, more pictures, birthdays, trips to the zoo, snow days, sandcastles, the kinds of photos people post online with the caption your family time. And for a second you feel dizzy, like maybe you imagined all the distance. Maybe the isolation you feel now is just a rough patch. But then the photos stop around the time you hit middle school. No more smiles. Just empty sleeves where pictures never got printed. The album ends and reality creeps back in. You start to wonder if something happened back then, something unspoken. Maybe not a dramatic betrayal or trauma, but a quiet shift, a drifting, like tectonic plates moving slowly but irrevocably apart. Historians still argue whether emotional coldness is a modern plague or a timeless survival mechanism. Some suggest that during the Great Depression, emotional detachment was common. People had no room for feelings while trying to stay fed. Maybe your family's detachment isn't unique. Maybe it's just inherited emotional economics. Feelings are expensive, and your family's on a tight budget. You decide to ask your mom about the photos just casually, no pressure. One afternoon, while she's making tea, you say, "Hey, I found the old album. There's a lot of happy pictures in there." She smiles faintly, her back turned. "Yeah, those were good years." You wait, hoping she'll say more, that she'll ask what made you bring it up, but she doesn't. Just stirs her tea, then moves on to something about a coupon she forgot to use. It's like watching a movie where the dramatic music builds and then cuts off mid-scene. Your dad forget it. He'd probably say something like, "We were younger then," as if that's the explanation, as if joy has an expiration date. Your house was never loud, never violent, but something went quiet in it, and no one talked about it. Maybe it was a layoff, or someone's depression, or just the slow burnout of parenting three kids in a house with too much responsibility and not enough connection. You'll never know, because no one says anything. You heard once that in traditional Japanese households, silence was a form of communication, respectful, even intimate. But there, the silence had context. Here, it's just void. And here's your fringe tidbit. In the Victorian era, children were often expected to be seen and not heard. Parenting manuals even advise minimal affection to avoid spoiling kids. Sound familiar? It's hard to know if your family chose this dynamic or if it just happened, like a fog settling over a field. One day you could see each other. The next, everyone was blurry silhouettes moving past each other without words. You start thinking about your grandparents. What were they like? You ask your mom once what her childhood was like. She says, "We didn't talk much, but we always had food on the table." You nod. That tracks. You ask your dad the same question. He shrugs. "We worked hard. My dad wasn't around much." Another inheritance passed down silently generation to generation. Emotional distance wrapped up and gifted like a family heirloom. Here's your light joke to cut through the melancholy. If family closeness were measured in hugs, your house wouldn't pass the TSA's liquid limit. But truly, this disconnection didn't start with you. It might not even have started with your parents. It could stretch back decades through wars, recessions, cultural norms, bad advice, and unspoken grief. You were just born into a system that already had its walls built. You didn't put them up. You just learned how to live inside them. Still, it stings. Knowing your family has more group photos than group chats. That the only things you really have in common are your last name and a shared Wi-Fi password. Sometimes you lie in bed and replay old moments. A birthday where you blew out candles alone while your siblings were on their phones. A holiday dinner where everyone left the table without saying goodbye. A hospital visit where no one held your hand. You don't want to be angry, and you're not. You're just empty. Like someone promised you a song and gave you sheet music with all the notes missing. You close the album and slide it back in the drawer. Not out of denial, but because you don't want it getting lost. It's proof that once there was something real, something close, and maybe just maybe it can happen again. Section 6. Nobody fights in your house. Not really. No yelling, no slamming doors, no dramatic declarations of, "I'm done with this family," that would at least suggest something is burning underneath. But here, the air is still. Cold. Clean. Sanitized. You've come to fear the phrase, "nothing's wrong," more than any curse word. It's the universal shutdown, the emotional Krupp-Salzpus-delete of this family. You hear it often in flat tones and clipped syllables. "What's wrong, Mom?" "Nothing." "You okay, Dad?" "I'm fine." "You seem off." "No, I'm just tired." Always tired. Everyone is always tired. It's like your whole family is running on emotional airplane mode. Just enough connection to get through basic life functions. Nothing more. And here's the strange thing, no one is lying. They do feel fine. Just like a room can be fine without furniture, art, or warmth. Empty doesn't always mean broken. Sometimes it just means unoccupied. There's a psychological term for this kind of dynamic emotional neglect. It's not abuse. It's not trauma with sharp edges. It's absence. The lack of being seen, heard, nurtured. Like trying to grow a flower in indirect sunlight and wondering why it won't bloom. Fringe fact break. In 1980, child psychologist Edward Tronick introduced the still face experiment. A mother stares blankly at her baby, no smile, no reaction. Within seconds, the baby becomes distressed, then gives up. Now imagine growing up in a house full of still faces. That's the long-term version. Your family has mastered the art of polite avoidance. There are no confrontations because there are no conversations worth confronting. You all skate past each other on perfectly glossed ice, never falling, never colliding, never truly touching. You once tried to start a fight. Nothing explosive, just an attempt at honesty. You said, "I don't think anyone in this house actually talks to each other." Your mom blinked. "That's not true. Your sister didn't even look up." Your dad muttered, "Now's not the time." Your brother just walked away. And that was that. Crisis averted. No one got upset. They just pressed mute. Historians still argue whether the decline of extended families, those multi-generational units of closeness and chaos, has contributed to emotional isolation in modern nuclear households. You think of your tiny 5-person setup and nod. Compact, efficient, unmoored. You don't know how to break through it. If you tried to sit everyone down and say, "Let's talk about our feelings," they'd probably think you joined a cult. Or worse, a podcast. You've read that some families bond during road trips, those long hours in a car forcing conversation. Not yours. You once drove 8 hours to a family wedding. The car ride was 90% highway noise and 10% "do you want to stop for food?" Even holidays, those culturally mandated together times, feel performative. You open gifts. You smile. You say thank you. Then everyone goes back to their screens, full and emotionally unchanged. And here's a joke to lighten the tension. If emotional honesty were a dinner side dish, your family left it in the car, wrapped in foil, forgotten, and definitely cold. You've developed your own tactics for surviving the quiet. You vent to friends, or rather about your family to friends. You journal, but only in metaphors. You try therapy, but every time you mention your family, you immediately say it's not like they're bad or anything. Because they're not. They're not cruel. They're just closed. Like doors you stop trying to open. And the hardest part, you're becoming like them. You catch yourself brushing off of friends. "Are you okay with?" "Yeah, just tired." You dodge emotional check-ins with practiced ease. You keep your earbuds in a little too long. Your room stays locked a little too often. You skip calls you don't feel like explaining. You want connection. You crave it. But you're also terrified of how hard it is to maintain. You weren't raised on emotional maintenance. You were raised on autopilot. Push through. Keep moving. Avoid vulnerability at all costs. There's this myth that family is about love, but more often it's about patterns. And in your family, the pattern is detachment. Sometimes in the middle of the night, you wonder if anyone else feels it. If someone else down the hall is lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking the exact same thing. Why don't we talk? Why don't we care? But you'll never know. Because no one asks, and no one answers. Section 7. You don't remember the last time someone in your family gave you a real hug. Not the casual side pat at a graduation. Not the quick arm over the shoulder on a holiday. A real one. The kind where someone wraps you up like they mean it, like you matter, like you belong somewhere warm. You're not alone in this. The whole house feels allergic to physical affection. No cheek kisses, no ruffling of hair, not even the brief shoulder squeeze that says I'm here. It's subtle, but it changes things. Over time, your body starts forgetting what it feels like to be comforted. You begin to equate affection with awkwardness. Intimacy feels invasive. Touch becomes a foreign language, and you tragically unilingual. You once hugged your sister randomly, no occasion. She froze, arms limp at her sides like a mannequin. Then she pulled back and muttered, "What was that?" For you didn't try again. Funny thing is, humans need touch to thrive. Babies in orphanages who aren't held often grow up with developmental delays. That's not a fringe theory, that's decades of research. But here's a weirder one. Ancient Romans sometimes rubbed their babies with olive oil instead of hugging them. Practical, sure. Nurturing, debatable. Historians still argue whether those practices affected emotional development or were just cultural quirks. You think back to childhood, were there cuddles? Maybe as a baby, sure. But the memories blur after that. You mostly remember being ushered around. Sit here. Eat this. Hurry up. No dawdling. Your parents didn't do bedtime stories or forehead kisses. They did lights out and closed doors. Your brother, too cool for hugs since age 8. Your sister, too cool for everything. The older you got, the weirder touch became. Even casual contact, bumping into someone in the hallway, felt like an apology waiting to happen. Everyone learned to give each other space. Too much space. So, your body adapted. You flinch at closeness. You brace yourself during goodbyes, hoping no one goes in for a hug. You date people who don't like cuddling. You say you're not a physical person, but secretly you are. You just never got the reps. Fringe tidbit time. In Sweden, public affection is rare, even among couples. Social norms prize personal space. But contrast that with cultures like Italy or Brazil, where people greet with kisses and walk arm in arm. Where would your family fall? Probably in a Swiss bunker with 4 feet between beds. You've tried to break the pattern. A friend once gave you a spontaneous hug and you froze, then cried in your car 10 minutes later, confused and kind of humiliated. But it made you realize something: you miss it. The warmth, the safety, the confirmation that you exist physically and emotionally in someone else's space. You start to see affection everywhere now. Parents holding toddlers at the park, teen siblings with matching bracelets, a couple sharing a blanket at the movies. And each time it feels like watching a language you never learned. You think about those love languages, everyone's obsessed with: acts of service, words of affirmation, all that jazz. You try to guess what your family's languages would be. Your dad's is probably completing house repairs without acknowledgement. Your mom's might be buying things on sale for you but never saying why. Your siblings TBD. And yours, you don't even know anymore. Joke break, because yes, we still need one. If hugs were apps, your family's devices would be out of storage and running iOS 5. You don't blame them. Not really. It's generational, cultural, habitual. You once saw your dad try to hug your grandpa, and it was like 2 rusty bikes trying to park in the same rack, clumsy and slightly tragic. But still, you wish someone would try. Even if it's awkward. Even if it lasts half a second too long. Even if no one knows where to put their arms. You've hugged people since. Friends, partners, once even a coworker. And every time you feel something stir, a mix of warmth and grief. Like waking up a part of yourself that's been asleep for years. You don't want to grow up to be like them. To start a family that feels more like an airport terminal than a home. You want your kids someday to know what it's like to be scooped up in arms that mean it. You want to offer the comfort you never got. To break the cycle, Because when love is absent in physical form, it starts to disappear in every other form too. Words sound hollow, acts feel robotic, and eventually, the only thing left is politeness masquerading as connection. You don't need 100 hugs a day, just one. One that lands. One that says without words, "You're safe here." But for now, you tuck your hands into your sleeves and walk past your family in the hallway. Careful not to bump. Careful not to hope. Section 8. Your house is quiet, always has been, but lately it feels strategically quiet, like everyone is working overtime to avoid each other. Every person has carved out their little island dads in the garage. Mom's in the kitchen with her earbuds. Your brother's behind a closed door gaming. Your sister's in the backyard face glued to her phone. And you, somewhere in between, wondering when home turned into a Wi-Fi hub with bedrooms. Everyone has their own everything, own screen, own routines, own snacks. The last time you tried to watch something together, it ended with, "I've already seen this," and "Can we just watch it separately?" So you did. You always do. It didn't used to be this way. Or maybe it did and you just didn't notice. But now it's glaring. The lack of shared experiences, the absence of overlap. You're all living in the same house but on separate timelines, like passengers on the same train car who refuse to make eye contact. Historians still argue whether modern individualism is progress or poison. The rise of personal space choice boundaries. Sounds empowering, right? But families weren't built for that much distance. At some point, me time became never us. Even meals have become optional. Everyone's on different clocks. Someone's doing intermittent fasting. Someone's working late. Someone just doesn't feel like sitting at the table tonight. And there's no rule against it. No one complains. That's the eerie part. This slow unraveling of togetherness has become normal. No announcements, just casual drift. Fringe fact. In 1965, the average American household watched TV together for about 3 hours a night. Now each person streams separately on different devices with different tastes in different rooms. Family rooms are more like charging stations now. You've tried to fix it. Once you suggested a game night. Your mom blinked. Your brother said he had plans. Your sister didn't respond. Your dad said, "Maybe another time." You knew what that meant. No. Even holidays feel disjointed. Everyone shows up, brings food, opens gifts. Then one by one they vanish, retreating to corners of the house like ants scattering after a picnic. You scroll through your own phone out of habit, and even that feels like a symptom. You're lonely, so you go digital. But so does everyone else. You could be messaging your family from across the hall, and it wouldn't feel any more distant. You start to wonder if this is what adult life looks like. Not broken, just segmented. Everyone living parallel lives with occasional crossings, like a family Venn diagram with minimal overlap. Here's your quick joke. If your family was a group project, everyone opened their own Google Doc and worked solo. And yet when people ask, you say, "We're good." Because what else would you say? We're polite strangers sharing a mortgage. You try to think of when the last family memory was made. Not a milestone like a graduation, a real moment, a beach day, a board game, a movie everyone laughed at. It's harder than it should be. You realize your family stopped creating memories years ago. And what's a family without memories? Just a group of people with the same last name and access to the same refrigerator. Fringe, cultural nugget. In rural Polynesian communities, it's common for families to live communally and share not just meals, but beds, chores, parenting, even dreams. They believe intimacy grows from living closely and intentionally. Your house. You've got 5 doors closed most nights and earbuds in all of them. There's no villain in this story, no big fight, no tragic twist. Just a slow, consistent retreat into comfort zones and personal screens. You all learn to be alone together. And sometimes the quiet is comforting. It's peaceful, predictable, but other times it hums with something else, something missing, a feeling that maybe you're supposed to collide sometimes, to interrupt each other, to laugh, argue, annoy, connect. You've read that families need friction. That tension is part of bonding. But here, there's no tension, just static. You imagine leaving home, starting your own place, your own rules. You'd have a no phones at dinner policy. Sunday mornings would be sacred. You'd cook together, laugh at burnt pancakes, fall asleep in a shared silence that felt earned, not default. But part of you is afraid. What if you don't know how? What if this hyper-independence is all you've learned and all you pass on? Still, you hold the hope, the tiniest flicker of rebellion against the silence. Because deep down, you know humans aren't built to live this far apart. And if your family won't break the pattern, maybe you will. Section 9. You notice it first in the text. Your family's group chat exists technically, but barely. It's mostly reminders. Dentist at 3. Leftovers in the fridge. Dad's flight lands at 8. Once your brother sent a meme, it got 0 replies. The chat went silent for a week afterward, like it had embarrassed itself. There's no "how was your day" or "look at this cute dog I saw." Just logistics. Cold, efficient, agenda-driven. You start to think that maybe this is how love gets lost, not in anger, not in betrayal, but in checklists. Tasks replace connection. And once that happens, affection becomes optional. You think of all the tiny moments that could have been something more. Like the time your mom texted, "Need anything from the store," you almost typed back, "A hug would be great," but deleted it. Too weird, too vulnerable. Instead, you sent apples. You remember school assignments about families. Draw your family tree. Write about your family traditions. You made things up. Said you played board games every Friday. Said your dad made pancakes on Saturdays. You needed it to sound right, normal, not clinical. But the reality is, the closest your family gets to bonding is via bullet points. Feed the dog. Don't forget to take your meds. Birthday dinner is at 6. The dinner might be nice. You'll all show up, eat, smile, say happy birthday, then drift again, like boats nudging briefly in a harbor before returning to open water. Historians still argue whether post-industrialization fractured the nuclear family or just exposed cracks that were already there. You read that in urban families today, dinner together happens only 3 times a week on average. In yours, it might be 2. Even planning vacations feels like a business proposal. What dates work? What's the budget? What's the itinerary? No one asks. What would be fun? No one says, "Let's do something together." Just because, fringe fact. In Finland, some families take silent vacations to the forest, no phones, no talking, just nature. Sounds peaceful. But your family doesn't need to go anywhere to practice silence. You're already Olympic level at it. Once you saw your friend's family FaceTime each other just to say hi, you stared like they were aliens. Who does that? Then it hit you. Maybe they're not weird. Maybe they're just functional. Your family's love is buried under routines. You know your dad cares because he checks the air in your tires. Your mom cares because she always leaves out allergy meds before flu season. Your sister cares in emojis, if at all. Your brother TBD. You think he once saved the last slice of pizza for you. That might have been his version of "I love you." Here's your light joke. If emotional connection were Amazon Prime, your family would still be waiting on shipping since 2009. You want more. You crave it. But asking feels selfish, or maybe dangerous, like knocking over a stack of carefully arranged boxes that no one wants to restack. Still, you daydream about moments where someone sees you, not your grades or your chores or your schedule, but you. Where someone says, "Hey, I noticed you've been quiet lately. You okay?" But no one does, and now you've learned not to expect it. It's not that you're unloved. It's that your family loves like introverts at a party, cautiously from a distance, hoping someone else makes the first move. You start to wonder if one of you moved away. What would change? Would the text become warmer? Would absence spark curiosity? Or would everyone simply adjust, shifting their routines around the new silence? You don't want to test it. Not yet. But the thought lives quietly in the back of your mind like a packed bag under the bed. Maybe love in your house isn't dead. Maybe it's just dormant, like a power strip turned off waiting for someone brave enough to flick the switch. Section 10. You wake up one morning and everything feels the same, and that's the problem. The silence is still there. The usual rhythms. The soft closing of doors, the footsteps overhead, the tap of a spoon against a mug. You walk past your mom in the hallway. She nods, sort of. Not a real nod, more like a motion that accidentally happened while her eyes were still on her phone. You nod back. Default setting. Your brother leaves the house. No, see you. No, I'll be back. You only know he's gone because the front door clicks shut. You check the driveway to see if his car is missing. It is. That's your confirmation. Better than nothing. And your dad in the garage, as usual. You can hear the distant sound of something being screwed into something else. Maybe it's a new shelf. Or the same shelf again. You stopped asking. The house hums with the sound of lives running in parallel, not clashing, not colliding, just existing. And that's when it hits you in a weird, quiet way. Nobody here is a villain. No one's trying to hurt anyone. In fact, if you surveyed your whole family and asked, do you love each other, they'd all say yes, without hesitation. The problem isn't love. It's access. The gates are locked. The drawbridge is pulled up. Historians still argue whether emotional openness is learned or inherited, whether vulnerability is a skill or an instinct. You suspect it's both. And in your house, it was never taught, never modeled, like expecting someone to play the piano when they've never seen one before. You're not mad at them, at least not in a sharp, fiery way. It's more of a dull ache, like a phantom limb, like something should be their touch words, connection, but isn't. You start noticing the little ways everyone avoids closeness. Eye contact lasts half a second too short. Conversations end before they start. Shared spaces are treated like waiting rooms, brief stops on the way to somewhere else. Fringe tidbit. In certain ancient tribes, families slept together in a single space, shoulder to shoulder, because closeness was protection, warmth, bond. Now you've got 5 rooms, and 5 locks, and 5 alarms that chirp if a door opens too late. Sometimes you picture your house from above one of those time-lapse maps that shows the flow of people. You'd see tiny dots moving independently, bedroom to kitchen, bathroom to hallway, office to garage, lines that barely touch, a choreography of solitude. Here's your last light joke. If emotional warmth were a thermostat, your house would be set permanently to energy-saving mode. But still, there's hope. Because even in all this quiet, there's a flicker. You care, you notice. And maybe that's the start. You've begun asking small questions again, simple ones. How was your meeting? Did you like that show? Sometimes they land. Sometimes they don't. But you're trying. That counts. You even hugged your mom last week. Kind of. It was awkward and short, but she smiled afterward in a way you haven't seen in a while. Like something old flickered back on. You told your brother you liked his music. He blinked, then said, thanks. One word, but real. You even sent a meme to the group chat. Your dad replied with a thumbs-up emoji. You laughed harder than the meme deserved. None of it fixes things overnight. You're still 5 islands floating quietly in the same sea. But for the first time in a long time, you've started building bridges. Tiny ones. Plank by plank. Because maybe the point isn't to feel close all the time. Maybe it's just to try, to reach, to risk a little awkwardness in exchange for a sliver of connection. You know now that emotional distance isn't always intentional. Sometimes it's just inherited silence, unquestioned routines, everyone waiting for someone else to go first. And maybe you're the one who goes first. So now, as your eyes get heavier and the hum of night begins to wrap around you, I want you to sit with this feeling not as something sad, but as something quietly courageous. Because the truth is not every family is loud with laughter or tangled in hugs. Some families are built on careful silence, polite rituals, and deep wells of unspoken love. And even if yours feels like a quiet place where warmth once lived, it doesn't mean it has to stay that way. You have the power to notice the gaps, to ask small questions, to send the text, to make the joke, to sit beside someone for no reason other than being near. You don't need a grand gesture to change a legacy. Sometimes healing starts with a quiet presence and the tiniest crack in the wall. So let go of any guilt, any need for drama. Just breathe. You're not broken. You're not alone. You're just a human learning how to reach again. The night is still. The air is soft. The questions are still there, but they don't need answers right now. Just rest. Let the quiet be kind tonight. Let your heart unfurl a little. One breath, one beat, one step closer to connection. You've made it through another day. And tomorrow, maybe another bridge begins.